the video about an orange striped monster. And it's not about you. I know, you are my orange striped monster. Oh, okay. He's probably gonna hang out here for a while. I know that's what you people want. You don't want me, you want them. My name is glitchwitch.jpg, and I make videos about internet horror, which means a lot of things. Analog horror, digital horror, creepypastas, internet urban legends, ARGs, all that good stuff. But my favorite thing to cover, and evidently y'all's favorite thing to watch, is analog horror. It's a subgenre of internet horror that's near and dear to my heart. It's kind of the thing that's kept me going making this channel, because I just love to talk about it, and I love to find series, you know, that maybe aren't as big as other ones and try to talk about those. And one thing I love is when y'all give me suggestions. Now, today the series that I'm covering was a suggestion, but I had heard of it before. And today we were talking about Dreams of an Insomniac, created by fellow internet horror YouTuber Pastra. Fellow, I say loosely. Pastra is much more beloved and respected than I am, and that's not a dig at myself. It's just the truth, and that's fine. Pastra is one of those YouTubers that, for some reason, flew right over my head. I did not hear about them until I really started like locking into the analog horror community, like on Twitter and stuff. And it's one of those things where, as I went to watch this series, and I looked through Pastra's channel, I haven't watched any of their videos yet besides Dreams of an Insomniac, but just looking at the content, I'm like, why hasn't the algorithm shoved Pastra in my face? Because very much things I'm into. Huge creepypasta guy, loves survival horror, analog horror. Like, I have a channel to bit, just what I'm saying. So, I had heard of this because people on like analog horror Twitter talked about it. It's the first release of retro release VHS's Analog August that they're doing. They're a tape company. They release movies and concerts and things of the like on VHS. They've done a few analog series before. They did Vita Carnis and Harmony and Horror. And they're doing a thing this August where they're releasing 4, one each week. And the first one was Dreams of an Insomniac. And that made me go, okay, I need to finally watch this. Combined with, you know, getting the comment saying I should watch it. And I'm not sponsored by Retro Release. Would I love to be? Yes, but I'm not. I just think they're really neat. The second release was the Mandela catalog. I have gone ahead and pre-ordered that. There'll be 2 more, and I think they plan to probably continue to release analog horror series, which I love that. I love to see, you know, a chance for creators to get some shmoney. I love a chance for us fans to be able to have something tangible. You know, I love the little makeshifts. I have, ooh, his crown fell off. I have my little Mr. Manticore makeshift. I have some other makeshifts coming in the mail, like an Under Nowhere one, and I have an intruder coming, and then I have like a Canito pet one. I don't think that was makeshift. I think that was. Come on, Diva. Diva down. Diva down. Okay, there we go. So I love it. I love analog horror merch. But anyway, those are the 2 things that made me go, okay, I need to get off my ass and I need to watch Dreams of an Insomniac. And glitchwitch.jpg is going to leave for a moment, and glitchwitch.png is gonna enter the chat. Meaning, I'm going to be transparent. Yes, I have been holding on to that joke for a long time. Yes, I am going to use it into the ground. Now, I am someone who I really only ever want to talk positively about things. If I'm not a fan of something, I don't really want to just say negative shit. I don't think it's helpful, unless it's part of a wider conversation. So the 2 times in the history of my channel that I have been a hater-ass bitch are for The Painter by Urban Spook, and I think because it often is part of a larger conversation of what can go bad within analog horror. Listen, sometimes I'm just hating to hate, but, you know, there are positives about that series, and I have discussed that at length in a bunch of other videos. And then I was also a hater-ass bitch for 11BX 1731. I know I said that wrong. Anyway, that was the most, like, hater on main I've ever been in my life, and I didn't like it because the creator saw it, and then I felt bad. And he was snarky to me. And honestly, it's a little bit of a badge of honor, I'm not gonna lie. But still, I don't want to be mean because, like, I'm making YouTube videos. Brother made a whole film series. You know what I mean? Like, who am I to judge? So, all of this to say, when I started watching Dreams of an Insomniac, I was going through a little bit of a, oh, I can't make a video about this. I am not vibing with this. And it was never that I thought it was bad. I want to put that out there right from the get, okay? I never thought it was bad, but I was not vibing with the initial stuff I was watching, which is volume 0. There's 4 videos. There's a volume 0, then there's 2 like in between ones, and then there's the longest one, which is volume 1. Now, I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I didn't want to give up, so I kept watching, and I will say, it did keep getting better to the point where I like full 180 by the end. And that's why I'm sitting here. And I actually talking to you about it because I want it on the record. I like Dreams of an Insomniac. I had to marinate on it. I like that though. I like a series where you can see the evolution, and my gosh, can you see the evolution? But the thing that really won me over about this is by the end of this series, I came to understand that Pastra loves this stuff the way that you and I love this stuff. And I'm not saying other creators don't. I think other creators absolutely love analog horror. But I don't think I have ever seen a analog horror creator get what analog horror is and the community and just like the joy of the analog horror trope the way that Pastra has. And that made me appreciate this series in a whole new way because it feels like a love letter, which I think is probably what I called this video because it's so fitting and it's so perfect. But it completely changed my mind on it. And I'll go through the things that I don't love, like that didn't work for me. And again, it's absolutely just me. Like there's things that I would change about this, that I think maybe are falling on analog horror tropes when they could be utilizing Pastra's own personal skills. Because one thing, Pastra is an illustrator, and he's a very talented illustrator, and frankly, that's one of my biggest, not to jump ahead, I wish he used his illustrations more, and his animation more, because I think it's really unique. And y'all know I love animated analog horror, or drawings, you know, people like Dr. Nowhere and stuff like that. So before I get into what I like and don't like and why I think it's such a great series to celebrate analog horror in the whole, what the hell is it? Now, I know in some of my more recent analog and digital horror analyses, like for Joaquin Bong's Polished Mercury and Thornbaker's Sleepwalker's Run, I've literally like shown the whole dang thing and then reacted to it. I'm not gonna do that for this because it's a little too long. My cat is he's sitting like a man. What are you doing? No, don't even think about it. Your punishment is to be on camera. My little boy. I'm just gonna run through major plot beats and, you know, such so that when I talk about it, it makes sense. But frankly, the lore here is a little confusing for me as someone who is not Pastra-pilled. There's a lot of little inside things that I don't think make it unwatchable if you're not familiar with him. But from what I've gathered from like Reddit and comments and things, there's a lot of like Pastra inside. I don't want to say jokes, but like Easter eggs is the right word. So, it starts off with volume 0, which is called Haunted Halloween PSA. And this has multiple little sections, but it opens up, Walter, you don't have a middle name. If you had one, I would be yelling it right now. It opens up with this text saying that your name is Tommy Merrick and you visited your family and you went and found these VHS tapes and you think they might be haunted. So this, I think, is setting up the series to explain why these tapes exist and the context of these tapes. Essentially, the premise that runs through this entire Haunted Halloween PSA is there's a series of break-ins and child kidnappings that are happening in this town in Eastridge County. It starts off with a Halloween store, a costume store, which, let me get the name. The name made me giggle. I really enjoyed the name. Grimzo's. I think that's funny. That's a funny name for a Halloween store. And if I am correct me if I'm wrong, Pastra heads in the comments. I think Grimzo is like one of his characters that he has used in the past. So, Grimzo's gets broken into and a costume is stolen, and the police are like, do not approach someone wearing this crazed inmate costume. They're a criminal because they stole it, right? And there's a conspiracy theorist thinks that there's more to it than just a simple break-in. There is. So that sets the tone, right? That something's going on. And this is 1986. So we're starting in 1986. And then that very Halloween, my cat is opening drawers. So then we immediately go into Halloween night, 1986, and this is when these kidnappings start. So we get a witness testimony from a guy named Alex Williams. He is important, remember him. And essentially, there was just a whole group of mothers who their children went missing and got kidnapped on Halloween. We talked to a police officer named Officer Kruger, who ends up also, he's a key player here, and we're told not to trust anyone wearing this costume, and any Pastra heads may recognize this little guy. I didn't. Which I think makes my viewing experience perhaps richer. I'll get into that later. That is a note I have. But anyway, so that's it, Halloween 86, and then it moves on to the police training tape in 1989. Essentially, this training tape is covering the incident at Grimzo's back in 86, but they have some security surveillance that is very compelling, and this is when I started going, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. And they say that that's the only evidence they have of this. They're calling it a demon. And but until now, they have uncovered another eyewitness look at the demon, and that was poor old Officer Kruger. He went into contact with the demon, and it was not good for him, and it put him through a whole bunch of physical transformations, which again is some of the stuff I really started to like about this series, is this little section showing all the things that Officer Kruger went through. But, you know, at this point, it's very much don't listen to it, don't interact with it, it's like a human, it'll trick you, you know, and it's a little familiar if you catch my drift, you know, in an alternate situation, which isn't a bad thing. I'm gonna get into it later. Things are not looking good for sweet old, they're calling it the Eastridge demon too, excuse me. So things are not looking good for dear old Officer Kruger, because he got in contact with the Eastridge demon and he's going through all sorts of physical changes. So we got a little body horror, which I like that. I think that that's a great thing to bring into analog horror if you're able to pull it off. And we're pulling it off here, so that's nice. And next we go into the Haunted Halloween PSA 1993. So it has been 8 years since the initial kidnappings, and at this point they have just become kind of like a weird fact of life. And Halloween movie is interrupted by this kind of like emergency alert that then cuts into this kind of cutesy dootsy wootsy Halloween PSA, and this is presented by the Lankman Foundation, and this is where I start to like, it's too much for me because I don't need to know who Lankman is for this to work, but I'm angry that I don't. And yes, I could deep dive, and maybe I will, but there is an ARG within Pastra's like normal YouTube content involving this character called Lankman, who he has then brought into this series, and he's kind of like an evil corporate entity. That's the vibe I get. So you don't have to know all of this for this to work, but I assume it is a richer experience for those who are like die-hard Pastra fans, which is fine. But anyway, Lankman Corporation is putting out this PSA. They are referring to the East Side Demon as the Smiling Snatcher and telling children, watch out for the Smiling Snatcher. They're saying, don't, you know, if someone knocks on your door after the curfew, don't answer it, even if it looks like someone you know. If it literally looks like one of your friends, the Smiling Snatcher is wearing your friend's skin, and it's too late, baby. So, that's scary. And then there's this sequence where there's a bunch of flashing images, and you see some of the missing children, and news reports, and drawings of the Smiling Snatcher, and some shots of who I assume is Officer Kruger in his messed up post-body horror, post-Eastridge Demon sighting. So that's it for Volume 0. And so after this one, I was like, okay, I don't know what I think, but I'm intrigued enough to continue. So I continued, and these two little interlude things, they won me over fully. I was, this whole experience for me when I first watched these, it was very much, not to sound like a goddamn millennial zoomer cusp, but I'm gonna, it was the kombucha meme. I was, and at this point, once I get to these two little interludes, I'm fully, I like it. And by the most recent one, Pastra stepped his damn, I was going to use, you know how you say like Mr. Krabs, you say Crussy? I was gonna say that for Pastra, but you know, that starts with a P, so it wouldn't really be doing nothing now, would it? So I'm not gonna finish that joke. But Pastra, Zachary, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let's move on. Next we have In Loving Memory, which is a, it's the Officer Kruger show, because the Officer Kruger show is what? Canceled because he's dead. But is he? Oh my gosh, we just have to watch to see. This is essentially like a memoriam video for Officer Kruger because he succumbed to his illnesses from seeing the East Ridge Demon, the Smiling Snatcher, Clyde, if you're friendly with him. And it says that he passed away in 1987 in the normal part of this video. Then we get this bright, shiny eyes looking at us, and it cuts to a different shot of Officer Kruger, and he is looking a lot emaciated and like a creature, you know, post-demon interaction, and his date of death now says 1996, so that's a lot longer than they led us to believe. It's a 9-year difference, so I'm assuming that was told to us in confidence in the police training tape, what happened to Kenneth Kruger, to Officer Kruger. So this is, you know, they're presenting something to the front, to the public, a front, that, oh, he died, but someone's been holding on to him and observing him, and based on what's to come, I think we know who that is, and it rhymes with dank fan. So let's move on to a family photo album, which I was hooked after Family Photo Album. I'm sure if y'all know me, like if you are a frequent viewer of glitchwitch.jpg, y'all know that this one would have hooked me. It's just impeccable found footage, frankly. This one opens up with good old Mr. Lankman Dr. Lankman, I don't know what his title is, I'm sorry. And saying that only authorized personnel within the Lankman Foundation can view this tape, and unauthorized personnel could face termination. Does that mean being fired? Does that mean being shot in the head? That's for Lankman to know and us to find out, right? This is 1987. Again, we're back to January 6, 1987. If we could go back in time and tell them what we all would think of when we thought of January 6th, what would they think? Maybe the Smiling Snatcher would have stopped January 6th, 2021? Yeah, 2021. There is a man calling 911 because someone is trying to break into his house. The police arrive on scene, and the only evidence they don't find the man. They find this weird photo of him and his family and a camcorder of what went down that night. And that's where the impeccable found footage comes in hand. So essentially, this man is searching for his son. His son is one of the children that has gone missing, and he's hearing him. He's walking around, he's hearing him. But obviously, as we know from the Haunted Halloween PSA, it's probably not his kid, right? It's probably not his kid. So the police start questioning neighbors, and they don't recognize the family in the photo. They're like, nobody ever even lived in that house. I don't know what the hell y'all are talking about. Which y'all know, I love that type of shit. Just, ooh, it's creepy. Just fully erasing the neighbors' memories. I don't know how they're doing it. It's fascinating. I'm very intrigued at this point. So then, essentially, the father that places the 911 call, he goes back home, and his child is knocking on the door and speaking to him, but it is not his child, it is the Smiling Snatcher wearing his child's skin. And he gets yeeted on out of there, and by the time the police come, all that's left is this family photo album. So this one, I was hooked. I finally was like, oh, I get it. This is some impeccable found footage. I got the damn memo, finally. I cared, really. I finally cared about the characters and the circumstances, and I think it's because for the first time in this series, it felt like its own thing. It didn't feel super derivative of other series the way that Volume 0 did. It kind of finally hit its own stride. And speaking of hitting its stride, it fully hit its stride in Volume 1, which is the longest one. It's 25 minutes. So let's talk about that one. This one, it's the most recent. It's only 3 months old. This is when I first heard about this series, was when this came out. I saw people on Analog Horror Twitter discussing this, because I think essentially it's the first big episode, right? Because the other one's Volume 0, this is Volume 1. So this is where, you know, the meat of the situation is getting started. And it is set up, there is a young man, Alex Williams, played by Pastra himself, who was essentially forced into working for the Lankman Foundation after witnessing some of the kidnappings from the earlier one. So that's some continuity we got going here. And he is essentially relaying to us all the information he knows about the situation at the Lankman Foundation, and that it is less than savory. We get this little cartoon intro from Lankman himself, or his cartoon representation, as he says, about why they founded the Lankman Foundation.
Hello. You don't know me, but I certainly know you. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Lankman, or at least a cartoon version of the man himself, created by our lovely in-house animator, Mortimer Gray, who you may know for his work on the classic cartoon series Candy Mouse. I come to you all today to announce the founding of the Lankman Foundation, a new gateway into the future of Eastridge County. 4 years ago, our lovely town was plagued by a species of creature we have come to know as the Veldigan. These dangerous creatures have continued to threaten our residents, with there being seemingly no end to the dangers they pose. Until now, our lovely founder, Herbert Lankman, created our foundation for the purpose of both containing this anomalous threat, as well as treating all those who have been affected by them. How does he plan to do this, you ask? Well, the answer is quite simple. Using the inheritance left behind by his father, Herbert Lankman got to work renovating and reopening the old Lankman's Asylum, repurposing it into a massive treatment center for all those who have fallen victim to the Veldigan. As well as this, he has been hard at work donating generous amounts to Eastridge County's police force, ensuring they can continue to do what they do best, protecting all of you. Here at the Lankman Foundation, we know these last couple of years have been scary, but don't worry. Soon enough, this will all be a thing of the past.
Cuts to a 911 call from a young woman who claims that there are men outside her house trying to break in and that they're wearing masks and they don't quite look right. Like they have like these bandage head things. And the police, well, after she describes what the intruders look like, the police just hang up. And then Alex starts talking about the technology that they have to use as workers at the Lankman Foundation. And they call it hallucinatory technology, and it's a way to control patients that they're treating. And they ask all workers to wear goggles at all times. You cannot remove your goggles under any circumstances. He describes these caretakers, and it's essentially the exact people who came for this woman that, you know, was the 911 call. So Alex sees the caretakers kind of handling this woman very roughly, and he assumes that she is a victim of the Veldigan, which I believe is Clyde, the Smiling Snatcher, the Eastridge Demon, to my knowledge, I think. Again, this is where I'm starting to be like, I don't know if I'm following. But essentially he feels bad for her and ends up going in and interviewing her to get more information from her. I'll just play that in its entirety here.
I don't want to go back.
Listen, I don't want to hurt you, I promise. I'm just here to ask a few questions is all. I'm sorry about what happened to you the other night. It was horrible. I want to try and make sure that doesn't happen again. And it would help a lot if you could answer my questions.
Okay.
Alright, thank you. Okay, so my first question. Why were you brought here? You didn't have any diagnosis, and you don't seem to suffer from any symptoms of Veldigan sickness.
I don't know why I'm here. These men broke into my house. Nobody came to help me. The doctor told me I'm sick, but I don't know what he means. I'm sorry if that doesn't help.
It's okay, don't worry. That helps a lot. You're doing great. Now, my next question. That night when you were attacked here, I know it must be a lot, and I'm sorry to bring it up, but do you know where they took you?
I don't know. He told me I can't tell anybody. I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. He said he would take me back there. And I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
Hey, it's all right. You're not going to go back there, I promise. I just need to know where it was. Nobody else will know.
They took me to room 66.
What? No, that's not possible. There's only...
It's him!
Just try.
He's going to take me back now! Please help me take him back!
He isn't going to take
Don't let him take me back! Don't let him take me back!
Quiet for a moment, don't...
Just what do you think you're doing?
So then Alex hears from this woman that she was taken to a room 66, which he doesn't believe because the asylum that they house all these patients in only has 65 rooms. So he, of course, goes to investigate. So essentially, he finds out there was a camera watching them. And when he takes off his goggles, he sees that there are cameras everywhere, and that was something they didn't know. And he's also able to find room 66, which was previously hidden to them because of the goggles. So they're being lied to about the goggles. Obviously, evil corporation, bad, shocking. He opens room 66, sees this giant demon, understands the full scope of all of this, and then he is met with the real face of Lankman. Lankman somehow just lets him go, but then by the end of this, he's starting to get nervous that they're going to come for him. So that's why he's recorded this, and he's made an archive, essentially, of everything that's going down. And I assume that that's going to be explored more in the next one. So as of right now, that is a very loose explanation of the plot of Dreams of an Insomniac. And I'm sure there's lots of hidden stuff. I'm not going to do that in this one. I kind of just want to talk about more the analog horror cultural implications of this. I know that like Monoxa has made a video about this. I'm sure that he goes real deep into all the clues and stuff, so I'm just here to talk about the feelings. Let me start off with what I was not vibing with, I guess, because it's better to you know, get that out of the way. So I think my main reservation here at the very beginning was really just that it felt so derivative. And the first one came out like 2 years ago. So I have to give it some credit there. Just like I recently covered Sisterhood of Salvation, LLC, and that started older, so it kind of felt derivative, but when you put it in the context of, oh, it's 2 years old, it's not as derivative. But the first one felt very much like someone who loves analog horror trying to make an analog horror and hitting all the tropes, which there's not anything bad about that, but I think that it suffered a little in Volume 0 because Pastra didn't fully let himself be himself. Whereas I think in later entries, it's its own fully formed thing with his style and energy, and they're greater for that. Like, there's certain things like, you know, you gotta have the police training tape. That's like a lot of it is very derivative of the Mandela catalog to me, right? And I totally get that. And even the Walton Files too, because those are what was big then. I mean, they're still big now, but I completely get it. Just as there are aspects of the Mandela catalog that are just totally derivative and rip-offy of Local 58 and Gemini Home Entertainment, but then, like this, that ended up becoming its own thing, finding its own voice. So I can't fault this for taking a second to find its own voice, because almost every analog horror has had to do that, save for things like Monument Mythos and like Joaquin Bonk and stuff like that that is so knows what it is right out the bat. So while that's a criticism, it's not really a valid criticism in my opinion, even though it's the criticism I'm giving, but it's why at first I wasn't really sold on it. And I think that the greatest thing that Pastra can do as he continues this series is embrace his unique talents, which are the illustration and animation, and teaming up with other, you know, 3D animators and illustrators like he did for Volume 1, because that's what is making this series memorable. I kind of wish that it was more like the Walton Files, where all the people were just drawn or like really, really edited. I know that in Volume 0, the children, and I assume Officer Kruger, are AI generated, and yes, I'm very anti-AI. However, Pastra has since, you know, regretted using it, and it also was 2 years ago before we all really knew the dangers of generative images. So I understand that, and he's not the only one. I mean, Alex Kister did that in the Mandela catalog for Ruth Weaver. You know, Liminal Land exists, and even things, you know, that I really respect and love, like Happy Meat Farms, have used AI, and I think it's just growing and recognizing it, and his reasoning was very valid. Pastra said that he didn't want to use real photos of children, because even stock photos, you're implying that something harmful has happened to this child, even if it is a stock photo that is a real child. So I get that, and we've had issues within the analog horror community of photos of real children, victims being used within series, so I completely get why he did that. Now, do I think it would have been cooler if he just drew them? Yeah. And I think that's where things like that were falling into the analog horror trope, like, well, I have to do it this way because that's how it's done. No, you don't. You can do it your own way and make it your own thing, and sure, some people may not be into it, but a lot of people will be. So I think just incorporating his art style and his, you know, illustrations more and more, and whether that's him literally drawing it or hiring a 3D modeler to animate them like he did in the most recent one, however it's done, that is the key to the success of this series. And I think that's the problem. I think it's just Volume 0 that I have an issue with, because it almost feels like a variety show of analog horror tropes. It almost reminds me of, like, if y'all are familiar with, like, WNUF, Halloween special, which is great. I love it. But this feels like it's trying to be the analog horror version of that, almost. And I don't know if it works. Like, I almost wish they were just all small, separate videos. It may not be as jarring if that was the case, because it worked a lot better for me with the In Loving Memory and the Family Photo album. So I think with each upload, Pastra kind of started to get his bearings on what he wanted out of this series, and it turned into its own thing rather than just, oh, I'm going to try to make an analog horror series. Now, my other main, I don't think this is a criticism, it's just something I want to discuss because I think it's interesting, and it's not really something we have run into really in analog horror at all, but especially on my channel, is there's like a weird barrier to entry with this if you aren't familiar with Pastra. And it, like I said, I kind of mentioned this earlier already, it's not unwatchable if you don't know some of his, like, inside Easter egg things, but you do feel like you're missing something. Like with Lankman and things like that. One of the big monster that Draxum did in Volume 1, Winfrey, was supposed to be one of his channel mascots instead of Clyde. So it's just certain things that I feel like I'm missing a lot of puzzle pieces. And yes, of course, I can absolutely go and watch all those videos. He literally has a playlist that's like the Lankman ARG. But it is a little bit much to ask a casual viewer who is not also a, you know, I'm a goddamn analog horror YouTuber. Of course, I'm going to go watch the ARG videos at a later date and learn more. But it's a bit much to ask just a regular viewer to engage like that. And perhaps he thought, like, this is just for my followers and they'll get a kick out of it, which is totally fine. But Diva, the world is watching. And I'm glad that they are. Now, on the other side of that coin, there is a bit of a weird thing for fans of Pastra, because the main monster in this series, the East Ridge Demon, the Smiling Snatcher, whatever you want to call him, it's Pastra's channel mascot, Clyde. So to me, as someone who I'm not familiar with Pastra as a YouTuber, and I'm not familiar with Clyde as a mascot, beyond, like, I've seen him in his like profile picture and stuff, I didn't understand that. I thought that he was an original character for Dreams of the Insomniac, so it didn't bother me. But I've seen a lot of comments from fans of his that are like, I can't be scared by Clyde, he's cute and silly to me. I'm used to him talking about, you know, Resident Evil villains and stuff. So that's something I get, and I do kind of wish, I don't know, that's the thing where I don't know if I wish he used a different monster, because frankly, it doesn't affect me. You know what I mean? As I continue to watch Pastra as a YouTuber, my feelings on that may change, but again, Clyde will always be the Smiling Snatcher to me first because I engaged with this series first. So there's some weird weaving that I think makes this not bad by any means. Again, I really think I like this series now that I've gone through it a second time, but it's just, there's a lot of moving parts for both people that know nothing about Pastra and people who are avid fans that make it a little hard to watch. So I don't have advice really. I mean, it's up to him to do whatever he wants, but I will say this is probably the most like lore confusing analog horror series I have encountered since like the Monument Mythos. And this one for me, it's a little harder to just like go with the flow because it's grounded in certain aspects of reality that the Monument Mythos isn't. Like, it's not as easy to just like lay down in the river and let it take you the way that it is for Monument Mythos. There's such a level of suspension of disbelief that's going on with the Monument Mythos because it's so balls to the wall. Whereas this, like, it's not that crazy of a concept, you know, fantastical demons working hand in hand with evil corporation is not a crazy concept. I mean, yes, it's ridiculous in real life, but for a horror concept, it's not that crazy. I don't want to say there's holes, but it's just, it's a lot for me to try to piece together without the prior information. And again, I know part of this, I'll say it again, it's my fault for not going back and watching all those ARG videos, but again, that's quite the barrier to entry for a, you know, less than an hour-long analog horror series to go have to watch another hour of content to understand the background lore. Those are my main criticisms, and those were why I was like, I don't know about this at first. Now, the things that I like is when I moved from finding it derivative, I realized that it was a way to honor analog horror. You can tell and you know just from looking at the content on his channel that Pastra is someone who loves internet horror deeply, deeply, deeply. And of course I respect that. I love internet horror too. And it really does feel like a love letter. And he kind of hits a lot of the big tropes. It almost feels like an earnest version of Gilbert Garfield. If you're not familiar with Gilbert Garfield, it is a ARG that I consider the ultimate satire of internet horror on the whole, where it literally hits every trope you can think of and takes the piss out of it, but in a very loving way. Dreams of an Insomniac almost feels like an earnest honoring of all internet horror tropes, because I mean, we got them in this. You've got PSAs, you've got analog horror scary faces for sure, you've got police officer, you've got police officer training tape, you've got, you know, anomalous entities that give you information that is too much for you to handle. You've got an evil corporation, found footage, creepy children, 911 calls. Like, these are all things we see. Like, I would go through it and be like, oh, well, this feels like this feels like that. Like, a lot of it feels like the Mandela catalog with the, you know, the entity whispering information which you cannot handle. All the stuff with the Langman Foundation feels very similar to Happy Meat Farms to me. Some of the 911 stuff feels like Greylock, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that it really starts to shine when you can tell Pastra said, no, this is mine. I'm gonna make this mine. And you get that from Family Photo Album On. And Volume 1 truly was its own thing. Aesthetically, I really like this when it fully leans into Pastra. I think that he's very good at straight up film stuff, like the interviews and things like that. I think the film quality on Alex, when he is relaying his final message about the archive, I love the visual quality of that. I think it's very easy to do footage of a person wrong in analog horror. It's happened a lot. A lot of people are very iffy on Mandela 4. I've kind of Stockholmed myself into liking it, but it's certainly not as strong as some of the other stuff. And then, like, personally, I was not a fan of the Monument Mythos modern day real footage. Anytime real footage is done well, especially of people, like this, I have to give my snaps because it's hard to do and it's hard to make work. It shouldn't be, you would think, but it is. It's hard to integrate into this style of storytelling. So I think that's really impressive. I think the voice acting in this series is some of the best I've ever heard in analog horror. It is really, really good, and there's a lot of it. Sometimes it's really good and it's in spurts, so, you know, you can't get distracted by it potentially being bad. It's consistently very good. The only thing I would say is sometimes Alex's stuff that I know is Zachary Pastra, it gets a little monologue-y, and I don't think that's a delivery thing. I think that's just inherently when you write a lot of expository dialogue, it's going to sound written, and ideally you would want him to maybe stumble on his words a little bit more in that frantic state, but that's just a hard thing to do. Hollywood films suffer from that, so that's just a difficult thing to do, and I'm no writer. But the visuals, really, like the drawings, I love Pastra's like animated segments. Like the animated segment of the Volume 0 is my favorite part of it. I wish the whole thing looked like that, to be honest, because it sets it apart from everything else. A lot of the rest of Volume 0 feels like any other analog horror series you would see, but when you introduce these filmed segments or the animations or the drawings of Clyde, like, it feels unique and it feels like its own thing, and that's what, especially now, we need in analog horror. I think that there are aspects of Volume 1 that feel a lot more in line with what I'm calling the, like, phase 3 of analog horror, which to me is your Dr. Nowheres, your Joaquin Bonks. So I think that we're getting there with this. This almost feels like a weird bridge between phase 2 and phase 3. Like, you're still getting that Mandela, Walton Files influence, whereas some of these other newer creators that I just mentioned, I think, are really just doing their own thing. And I think that Draxum, who worked on this and has worked on the Mandela catalog recently, I think she fits in this new wave. I know that she kind of made her name being a Mandela catalog fan artist, but she's one of the most compelling visual artists, period, to me working right now. Outside of internet horror, I just love the way she does stuff. So seeing Pastra work with people like her, I think really, you know, amps up the production value. And that's the thing I will always say to any analog horror creators out there. Find friends, find a team, because all of these series, they get better when people work with a team. And clearly, Pastra has worked with the team from the get-go, and you can tell, you know, look at the credits. But it feels like a labor of love on all parts, and it helps. It helps a lot. Like, having friends to bounce ideas off of, and voice act, and make music, it makes it a complete package. So I applaud this series for that. And speaking of music, the music is impeccable. I would say it's some of the best I've heard in a minute. Lyra Horrors did the music and did an impeccable job. I love me some good music in analog horror. I made a whole video about it. If I ever made a part 2, this soundtrack would absolutely be included and highlighted because it was very good. I didn't expect this series to make me as warm and fuzzy as it did. I really, really appreciate, like, just the passion that Pastra clearly has for the genre of internet horror on the whole, and that's something that I don't always feel in these series, and I don't have to. But as someone who is such a fanatic, it's just a good reminder of why we love this stuff, right? And that's why I can see to maybe some more casual viewers of analog horror and internet horror, it may not gel with them as much, but to me it does. And do I think it's the best ever made? No. Do I think it's really damn good and it has a lot of potential? Yes. And we're at a point now where the ones that are my favorites, they're not even the best ever made. Like, I'm a big Mandela catalog, really. Do I think Polished Mercury embodies it in every way possible? Yeah, I do. And that's just the nature of this. So it's hard in a very saturated market to stand out, and I think that that's what this series probably struggles with more than anything, is that it fits into so much of what is already out there. But for people like me and you watching this video, because I assume if you were watching people talk about analog horror on the internet, you are very into it. It's just a nice little warm fuzzy hug almost. And, you know, I wouldn't say it's that scary. I think some of it's creepy. We got our analog horror creepy faces for sure, so thank you for that, Pastra. We always gotta add more little guys to our analog horror spooky face army. But it feels like something that I would, you know, make a cup of coffee with pumpkin spice creamer and throw on while I burnt my autumn candle and decorate my house for Halloween. I would have this on in the background. That's the vibe, and I think that's really what analog horror makes me feel. So I was really touched by this. It does feel like a love letter to the genre and to the community that loves it, and especially in a time where I think a lot of people are being a little unfairly harsh to analog horror and saying it's done, it's overplayed. I think it's nice to have something like this because it reminds you why you love the genre and all the things that the genre can be. And, you know, it did that, and now I think it's moving into its own thing, and I think that's awesome. And honestly, I'm really glad to see that this was the first release in the Analog August thing that Retro Release is doing, because it's not what I expected at all. But now that I've seen it, it makes the most sense because it truly is emblematic of everything that is great about this genre. So please let me know what you think about Dreams of an Insomniac, and if you're a Pastra fan, let me know what your favorite Pastra video is, because I'm going to start going through and watching all his videos. Y'all know I love an internet horror YouTuber, because I love myself. If you have any other series you'd like me to cover, please let me know. I definitely want to keep taking y'all's suggestions, because every time y'all suggest me something, I have a great time. I do hope to put a Mandela Catalog Volume 5 video out. I know that Alex said that there's going to be like a smaller video coming out soon, so I've kind of been waiting for that just so I can kind of 1-2 punch them. But I know I've mentioned that like in my membership and stuff that I'm going to do that. It's still going to happen. I like to rush to these smaller things first. Not that this is a bigger one. This is one of the bigger ones I've covered in a minute, to be honest. But you know, it's smaller than the Mandela Catalog and the damn Walton Files. I hope that everyone continues to watch this as it unfolds. I hope that Pastra continues to do horror fiction, because if Bro wrote an ARG, like, clearly he knows what he's doing, right? So I hope that there's more from him in the future. I think it's always a little scary to go from YouTuber to, you know, filmmaker, right? A lot of people do it though, so keep going, bud. Look at Kyle Edward Ball with Skinamarink. The Rocka Rocka Boys just finished filming their second movie. Like, you can do anything, okay? Freaking our Wonder Boy, Kane Pixels. Is that movie still happening? I don't know. I hope so. But anyway, sky's the limit. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for suggesting this to me. I appreciate it so much. And I have to thank my lovely members. We have the Creepypasta OCs here, and then in Survival Horror Emo, we have E-Rob, Odini, and So-Called Punk, and then in Analog Horror Scary Face, which today the Analog Horror Scary Face in question is Clyde. Give it up for Clyde. We have Kira Coffer. So thank you so much for watching. I know this was a little bit rambly. It's definitely a feelings-based episode rather than an analysis episode, but this made me feel a lot of things, and I appreciate it. And I tried to do like Clyde drag. It didn't work. I was putting nails on. I ran out of time, so I had claws ready. I don't have neon yellow eye shadow. So I just put white and like lime green and gold and tried to make it work, but I did do striped eyeliner. I'm trying, y'all. But thank you for watching. Thank you, Pastra, for making this. And don't answer the door after 6 p.m. on Halloween if someone's knocking, because it's going to be Clyde wearing your friend's skin. Okay, that's my final message. Bye!